So continuing from the previous video, you can see at the top of the page we have got total slack, which is different from free slack as we discussed in the previous video. Now going to Microsoft Project, we're going to copy the total slack column and paste it in the Excel document. I've got to be careful. A common and easy made fault is just not to paste in the right spot, so it's always good double check. That is easy done. Now the next thing we need to do, scrolling up to the top of the form, is we've got our task ID just as a little check going back to where we were before, and we now want to look at the critical path. Just makes it a bit easier for us to track things. So we'll go back to the Excel, to the Microsoft Project document, and we'll go and we'll create a column that tells us the critical path. So we insert a column, we search for critical, and it's given us our critical path. We can see when we look across, because we have set the view to show us the critical paths, we can see the activities on the critical path are in red, and we can actually see the slack. Let's go back and reset the slack view again. Got to be careful when we're holding things like that we don't create a path. So make sure we set the critical. Done. Let's go back to our, and we can make sure that now the slack will become visible. Let's scroll down. We can see that the blue tasks with the, as we scroll down a bit lower, you can see that's a slack. Scroll down again, you can see some tasks are very large slacks. Scrolling down a bit more, for example, this task has 30 days worth of slack. So when we talk about resource leveling, we can see that this stuff's important. Okay, we find that we've also, at the moment, we can actually see that we've allocated some resources, but we'll show you how we do that in a later video. Now we can copy this critical column and again paste into Excel. So now when we look at it, we can see certain tasks are actually on the critical path. Now when we're trying to develop the critical path, scrolling to the top of the page, we've talked in another video about alternate critical paths, but for the moment let's look at what we've done with that critical path. So you can see that we've made the sum of activities. As we can see, this is all. This is critical. We've got to be careful. That's just something that we're putting in, but we don't see that as a part of our path because that's actually a deliverable. We can see that from here to here is critical. If we look over the column, we see that we're now going from J5 all the way down to J10. So here the reference cells links back to this, not to the task ID, because we're doing a reference in Excel. And you can see that that allows us to collect the path, but also allows us to collect all the data that's contained in the beta term distribution. This becomes important later when we do our forecast. You'll see that we'll go equal maximum. All we mean by that is that these three alternate, this is the first critical and these are alternate critical paths, which means they have durations that give rise to a slack disappearing if the pessimistic estimate was to come to pass, is a simple way of seeing a near critical path. So you can see that we can calculate alternates, pick the highest, which normally always is the critical path, but worth doing, and that will then give rise to that automatically when we do the calculation. So we've now got our critical paths. In later videos we'll talk about identifying alternate paths, but I think for now, if you get to this stage, you've done well, and then we'll go through the process of looking at alternate paths and how do we actually do a comparison between these alternate paths and how we use crystal ball to actually do a forecast.